happiness really is something going on inside of me while I'm living life. And that's what I call like that contentment, that satisfaction with life. That's where I see real Simcha Sachayim.
Welcome to Rebbi, I Have a Question, a podcast from Shapell's and Midreshet Rachel V'Chaya. I'm your host, Donna Margolis, and in each episode, I sit down with Rabbi Shurin to explore one question sent in by a student or an alumna. Questions about family, relationships, identity, and the lifelong journey of becoming a Torah Jew. With over 4 decades of guiding students, Rabbi Shurin brings Torah wisdom from our sages, life experience, and the teachings of his grandfather, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky Zatzal, to some of the most sensitive and personal issues we face. You may be surprised by what you hear. Let's begin. Hi, Rabbi Shurin.
Hi.
It's great to see you.
Always great to be here.
Yeah, it feels like a while since we've recorded a podcast together, so I'm very happy we made time for it.
Uh-huh.
I think we have a really important topic to discuss today.
Go ahead.
So we'll tell our listeners that we're actually recording this episode on Erev Shabbos, Parshas Zachor. Right? Which means Purim is in the air. It's already been Adar for a bit, and we all know that Adar is supposed to be a very happy time, right? In fact, Chazal tell us that Misha Nichnas Adar Marbim B'Simcha, that when we bring in Adar, we increase our joy. And we also know that in general, there's a mitzvah gedola liot b'simcha. There's actually a big mitzvah to be happy. So I thought that maybe this episode would be a good time to give our listeners some tips, not just tips, but to discuss the concept of Simcha a little bit, and to give us something to think about on Purim. Why?
I mean, I want to discuss it sort of in my Nestor's life, and I hope they can take something from that, examples from it, but it's going to be a little bit on a personal side.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping for, honestly. That's always better. So, I mean, the reason I think also it's such an important topic is because if we're really being honest, which of course we always are, Rabbi Shurin, that Simcha is not always easy. And right now, certainly for those of us living in Israel, and I won't limit it to us in Israel because it's certainly true throughout the world, that we're actually living in pretty complicated times. If we pay attention to the news, we could really exist in a state of fear and uncertainty. And a lot of people have real concerns. And I just want to add one more thing, and then I'll start with the questions, because I think it's just important to say that I've heard from a lot of people, and I'm sure that you have also, that Purim isn't always a simple day on the calendar. I mean, first of all, we have our singles, and sometimes it's hard to see families celebrating together and sort of not knowing exactly where you fit in or belong, right? Some people don't have kids, and they are desperately, hoping and wanting to have their own children to have fun on Purim with. And some families, let's just be real, have children that aren't even so excited to be celebrating Purim, and then you feel a lot of lack or loss about that. And even homes that look like they've got it all going on, it's not always an easy time. So as we come up to Purim, we wanted really to ask you, Rabbi, what the Torah means by Simcha. Is it a feeling? Is it a decision? Is it a perspective? And how we bring more of that into our homes. So let's start with this question. Okay? You ready?
Go for it.
What is your working definition of Simcha? In other words, what does the Torah mean when it commands us to be joyful, to be b'simcha?
Okay, great. So let me just say, practically, is when we talk about the Torah, I think you're correct that the Torah, mitzvah gedolios b'simcha is a comment by Rav Nachman Breslov, actually. So it's not doesn't go back to the Bible. But I think you are correct that it's clear from the Torah, where the Torah talks about in the Tochacha, Tachas asher lo avadates Hashem Elokecha b'simcha v'tov levav merov kol, right? That it's obviously a major part of living a Torah life. There's no question about it. And actually, in Tehillim, it does say what you're saying. Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha is a command, right? So we do have that. And I'm sure that based on these things is where Reb Nachman came up with the idea mitzvah gedola lios b'simcha. And it's important to say mitzvah gedola because we have a lot of mitzvahs, but he's saying it's a mitzvah gedola, which means it's an outstanding mitzvah. Okay, so let me just give you sort of my definition. I mean, it's not going to be full of pizzazz, but I think I don't think happiness and simcha is really about the moment, right? So for me, simcha is a happy inner contentment and satisfaction with life. An overall satisfaction and content lifestyle and feeling that inside of you. Because
can you just repeat that phrase?
Sure. A happy inner contentment and satisfaction with one's life.
Thank you.
We call that, by the way, in our expression, they use it in Yiddish and Hebrew, Simcha Sachayim. Mm-hmm. Okay? Simcha is really a state of being, like you sort of pointed out, right? You were sort of maramas to it, and it's not a fleeting moment. In other words, it's an inner feeling that goes with me all the time. And I want to just point this out because I tested it. I tested it when I took my first real loss in life, when my dad passed away. My dad's from Levracha. And for some reason, I wanted to know for myself, will I be happy again? So while I was sitting Shiva, I was thinking about this. People are coming and talking about my father's life and how impressed they were and what kind of impression he made on them. And I was sitting and thinking, am I now a happy person? And the answer was, yes, I am. It's just the happiness was pushed to the back of my feelings now because I have a sad feeling going on. Mm-hmm. But there was no moment I felt that I was not content and satisfied, and that idea was gone. I had no moment like that. It was just put on hold for a moment. And as soon as, time passed, again, the Shiva, the Shloshim, the Yud Beis Chodesh, as soon as time passed, I was able to really just bounce right back into that mode that I had. And that's why I think that's really what's very important about Simcha is that we should realize it's not this, going on vacation and having that fun time on vacation, which I'm not against, but that's more what I would call fun than happiness, and happiness really is something going on inside of me while I'm living life. And that's what I call like that contentment, that satisfaction with life. That's where I see real Simcha Sachayim. I just do want to say something because I feel that a lot of times we see the Na-Nachmans and they're so samech, they're jumping up on the top of their truck and stuff. So mm-hmm. I don't think that what they're going through is invalid. I think it's completely valid. But there's two ways of being besimcha. There's one way where you have this inner contentment, and sometimes you could see it on someone's face. They just smile and stuff like that. I remember seeing it with my grandfather, who was a Litvak, so he wasn't going to dance on the table on Purim, right? But I did see it in my grandfather. I saw it in my father, this contentment in life, right? This sort of happiness with living life. The Breslov guys are, these are the guys that jump up and down, with Simcha, and they're kissing everybody and hugging everybody. Tein li chibuk. Like they're into that. There are definitely there's definitely a validity in expressing the simcha I'm having. Like you see people scream when they're in the simcha. You see people jumping up and down when they're in simcha. And I want to tell you, there's a source in the Tanakh for it. By David HaMelech, it says when he took the Aron to Yerushalayim, HaMelech David mefazez u'mecharker lefnei Hashem. he was mefazez is an English word used pizzazz mefazez umecharker. He was dancing like a crazy man, right? Well, he was dancing in such a crazy way that Michal called him out at it afterwards, right? So we may not agree with Michal in this situation, but what she saw was correct. The guy's going nuts, right? He's dancing like a crazy person. I want to tell you that sometimes is a simcha sachayim when you're jumping up and down, not just because of what happened at that moment, you heard good news, but you're jumping up and down about life. That's an expression of simcha. Of course, you need the inside needs to be there. You can't have the outside of dancing up and down and not have the inside. Maybe people think if I do the outside, I'll get the inside. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But I think it has to come from the inside. And that expression that David had on the inside, just if there was Hashem b'simcha, he had that aura in front of him, he was going to dance like a crazy guy, right? That's before God. That type of simcha is extremely important, and that's what David was doing. He was expressing his simcha before God about the Aron and about building the Beis Hamikdash. It was all there.
I want to go back to something that you just mentioned briefly, because I think it would be interesting for our listeners to hear. You mentioned Rabbi Yaakov, who we all know was a real Litvak, right? And Litvaks don't have the reputation for necessarily seeming so
Right.
happy. But as a child, and I guess as you became an adult, you clearly felt that he was a happy person. How did you see that in him?
That's a good question. Just by interacting with him, he was such a positive person.
Mm.
Unhappy people tend to be negative. I hate to say it, but it's true that unhappy people tend to always see a negative side, right? And we have to help those people try to see the positive sides in their life, because I'm sure they're there. Okay. And I would say in the vast majority cases, they're there. And just by being with Rabbi Yaakov, he always smiled. He always smiled. He was you'd almost never see a picture of him not smiling, right? Because it just brought out the happiness. When someone wanted to take a picture, he said, "Go for it," and that was the type of person you felt it. Like it wasn't even like he had to tell me that he was happy, even though I think once or twice he did mention it, that that he was living a very happy life, especially after he came to Canada and the United States, where he actually was making enough money to support his family, and he was doing stuff in his life that he wanted to do. He wanted to be head of a yeshiva and stuff like that. And he had so many people that, when I knew him already, that really were in awe of him and went for his counsel. It makes a person feel good. It makes a person really feel good and feel needed. And there's meaning in a life where a person is really needed. So it was very clear when you sat with him that he was just a happy person.
Mm-hmm. I wish our listeners could see you as you're speaking about him, because you're smiling just
Right.
talking about him. It's very, very engaging. So it sounds like what you were alluding to, both in what you mentioned earlier and also regarding Rabbi Yaakov, is that when a person has a sense of mission or a sense of purpose, and it comes along with a meaningful existence, that perhaps contributes to that sustained feeling of well-being that you mentioned at the beginning.
I think you're right, Don. I think that you have to put in the word mission and purpose, and then we could talk about doing things that are that are meaningful in life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that's also all part of the definition of living a content and happy life.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a great lead-in to my next question, because I think this is something that personally I've wondered about. I've gotten to know you and Rebbi and Esther over the many years that we've known each other. Maybe I think it's almost 30. Hard to believe that, right? And I think most of our listeners also know that together you've raised 10 children. You built a beautiful home filled with Torah, and at the same time, you probably had to navigate the normal ups and downs of life. I'm sure there were pressures and I'm sure there was a lot of responsibility, right? We all know the responsibilities that you faced. And those of us that know you also know that through the years there have been challenges and sad things that have happened in the family and so on. I guess we would love to know, and you mentioned this at the beginning, on a personal level, how were you and Esther able to cultivate that simcha in your home in a real and sustainable way and sort of infuse it into your kids and today I'm sure into your grandchildren?
Okay, I think it's a very important question. And here I have to give you something very personal. So I don't know if this is going to be the good news or the bad news, but my simcha is not built on emunah and bitachon. Now,
Okay.
and which a lot of people say, as long as you have emunah and bitachon, you're going to be a happy person. I'm not denying that, but I'm going to give you another road to simcha, another avenue. Okay, which this I used in my life, and it's very simple. Ezu Ashir Somer Bechelko. Who is you want to call it a rich person, but it really means a happy person. Okay, because obviously he's not going to be rich if he's Somer Bechelko, because he may not have a lot of money, right? So who is the real rich person? The one who's content with what he has. Obviously, of course, we don't, this really means is the person's content with his life. There are some people who have a lot of money. I once read this in a book by, I think by Dr. Twersky, Professor Twersky, Avram Twersky's a Zichrono Livracha. He said he had so many patients with so much money that was so unhappy. And then he had these like normal middle-class people who are just happy people. So, if the person's running for money to get happy, he might as well stop at the red light and forget about it because it doesn't necessarily work. It helps in life, don't get me wrong, to have money, but that's not the goal of our goal in happiness can't be to have a lot of money. It's just not going to work. But I don't want us to forget that we really have to, when I say I'm content, I didn't look at other people. I have wealthy friends that I could really have looked at and say, oh boy, we got to get ahead, and stuff. I didn't feel like that. I felt with whatever we have, that's enough, right? And I didn't forget what Dr. Tal Ben Shachar said. Dr. Tal Ben Shachar said that, he has an excellent work called Happier, and I would tell everybody to read it. It's not a long work. It's a short book. And he says, and this gets into what you said before, Don, doing something meaningful, fulfilling your mission, right? Something meaningful and something enjoyable in your life, okay? But he always adds that you have to be able to pay the bills. Mm-hmm. Once you can pay the bills, right, there's not that much difference between you and the guy who's going on 10 vacations a year. Mm-hmm. You could be just as happy as him once you can pay the bills. This is what he said. And of course, like you said, we had challenging times in our lives. And I'm going to give you some examples. As you know yourself, and everybody who's listening knows who's married, right? And who's not married, they should know this before they get married, is that no two kids are going to be the same. And the kids are going to present challenges in school, right? Some kids are going to just be they just fly right through elementary, high school, and they do well, right? Some of them don't even have to study, other of them have to study, but they do the studying, right? And they're just what we would call perfect students in that sense. And then you have a lot of kids who are not that, right? And we have to deal with that. I had to deal with someone telling me who had my older daughter as a student saying to my younger daughter, why can't you be like your sister? And of course, my daughter, which is, of course, I would fire a teacher for that. Okay. But of course, the younger sister, who she said it to, said, because I'm not my sister. Okay. Which that shows me she's much more profound at 12 years old than her teacher. Okay.
100%.
Right. So that's going to be challenging. And at that moment, there's going to be a lot of stress, but a person has to feel, you know what? I've got to create a human being here. Right. And that in itself could be very satisfying. I mean, the challenge is there. The stress is there. We got to figure out how to do this with this child. And we have to do it. right? And at the end of the day, you can feel that satisfaction when that child grows up. And Baruch Hashem, my children are all grown up, so I could see the payrote of this. I had a daughter that got divorced. That's challenging times. There's no question about it. In a lot of ways, it's challenging times, not just going through the divorce and everything else like that. But Baruch Hashem, she's married today for a very long time already and very, very happy in her marriage, right? But people have this in life. A lot of, families today have kids who are divorced and they go through it, and it's not easy times. But like I said, you have to be able to decompartmentalize over here. You're happy. You're happy as a person. You're content as a person. Now I have a challenge in life that I have to push aside some of that happiness and work, right? And again, the work can feel happy. If you do it right, it can feel meaningful. It can feel happy, right? And you just have to have the right attitude with this. I didn't say, Donna, when my daughter got divorced, it's basher. This is what God wants. I don't say those things. The first thing I say is, okay, how are we going to patch up, my daughter's life? What are we going to do to help get her back on the road to success, right? I mean success not financial, but everything in success, right? So that's and I think, by the way, I did raise happy kids, right? Even though, when I married them off, it wasn't easy. There were financial challenges that were not easy at all. I took loans from people. Later marriages were a little bit easier. I was making more money and had less kids in the house. So, but it is challenging. It's very stressful when you're marrying off a child. And that stress is not only when, you're hoping that they have a nice marriage, but just the finances can be very stressful. Mm-hmm. And I decided with Esther that we're not going to, stress ourselves out by buying kids apartments and stuff like this. We'll do whatever we can to help. And that's what we do even today, whatever we can to help. But to buy an apartment is far beyond a mechanech's, if you're making a living as a mechanech, as a teacher, right? It's far beyond our means to be able to do that, especially for 10 kids. Because if you figure even $50,000 a kid in Israel for an apartment, right? You put down you're talking $500,000, right? I don't think I'm ever going to have that. So forget about, the 10 kids, right? Mm-hmm. So you do whatever you can, if they need help with the rent and stuff like this, and you do it happily. I want to tell you something interesting. When I was 12 years old was the first time I heard Esther Jungreis speak. She spoke in the Catskill Mountains on the lawn in the Laurel Park Hotel. And she spoke every Shabbat for men and women, which was unusual, speaking for men and women. This woman was maybe 30 years old, maybe in her mid-30s, not much more than that. And she was out there, she's a fire and brimstone type of person. And I remember her saying, even as a kid, it didn't mean much to me, but she said, don't leave your money to your kids. Give it to them when you're alive so you'll see and be happy, and you'll see how that they're using for X, Y, and Z. And you'll have that nachas of being part of their lives. Don't wait because then you won't see how they're using your money, right? So that we help out, and we're happy to help out when we can and stuff like that. But and my kids, by the way, felt all this, so they're happy kids. Some have more money, some struggle. But they are happy kids. They can joke about life. They can speak about life. And it's very beautiful for me to see that all my kids, with all their different challenges, their specific challenges in life, like we said, sometimes the kids are challenging, sometimes finances are challenging. With all that, when you just add everything up, you see a happy person. And that's really
what do you think that comes from?
I think they saw us as being very content in life. Mm-hmm. You were able to pay the bills. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, I don't want to joke about this, but my kids used to invite their friends over on nights that we had meat, mm-hmm. on nights that we had cheese, mm-hmm. and the kids would come over to the house because they had pasta, but their moms and dad couldn't afford cheese. Mm-hmm. So we were so happy to have the kids over. Right. Some of my kids were always sent home by dinner time, when the family, we had the kid, oh, you're here? So you have dinner with us. Esther always said, we have to have a full fridge. Okay. And it doesn't matter if it's for our kids or for the other kids, we have to have a full fridge. So that's what I say. Esther was very makpid on that we have to have a full fridge. If a kid comes in, right, we have to be able to feed them, because there are some kids that, like I said, just they're from very poor families. And we did have the food to put on the table, right? We could pay our bills. And that was really important. I'm not saying we didn't cut corners in certain places, right? Esther laughs about it, and my kids laugh about it. When you have 10 kids, so if you give them shkede marak, if you give them, what do you call it in English?
Soup nuts.
Soup nuts. So the whole package is going to go that night. So I would say soup nuts are for Shabbos, because I didn't want to use up the whole package, If you put out ketchup, right? So it's gone. The awesome ketchup is gone that night. 10 kids, gone. Okay. So we talk about that. The kids would say, Daddy, come on, But I would say, no, we got 10 kids here. We got to make sure, right? But they were not unhappy kids. They may have been unhappy at the moment they couldn't get those shkede marak, but the soup nuts, but they were not unhappy kids. They were just happy kids. And everybody wanted to hang around them. They used to love coming to the house because it was a happy home, and the kids could feel this. Okay, I do want to stress one thing, that we had a career. We have careers, I should say, even today, that are very meaningful. Okay, they're careers where we teach others, we help others bring out their potential, like you said, see what their mission is in life. We show them the beauty of a Torah life and the truth of a Torah life, right? We guide them in very difficult times, right? I don't have to tell you. I don't have to give an example, right? Very difficult times, right? And giving and helping others is a very important ingredient. If you want to figure out the ingredients in happiness, it's very important. Esther always says to me, Yitzchak, right? Just know we're happy because we give to others. Okay, and that's very important. The Alter of Slobodka was very, very into it. I want you to know, Martin Seligman, who's created positive therapy, he writes this again and again. When you help others, and especially if you help others for free, right, you're very content and happy with your life because you're giving. The minute you start taking, you may have a lot, but you probably won't be happy.
Beautiful. Rabbi, just before we go on to the next question, do you have another one or two anecdotes? Maybe it's her story to tell, but from Rebbitzin Esther and some of her contributions to the happy home?
That's a great question. I should really call Esther. She'd probably do a good job, but I should probably talk for a half hour on that. But I think Esther, as a person, never let anything stress her out. I was the more stressed one in the family. Yeah, I was more
surprised.
You're surprised, right? She
didn't
let anything stress her out. Now, maybe it did come from also the fact that she has a lot of bitochen and emunah, right? But I don't even think so. I think it was just like she made up her mind that she's not going to allow the stress in life to stress her out and therefore stress the kids out, right? She just very much drove ahead very strongly. If we had a problem, let's drive ahead and let's try to solve it, right? And let's not get stuck like we can't do anything, put our hands up and just be depressed. Like, let's move ahead and let's think, even if we don't have ideas yet, let's think of ideas on how to solve these issues, what we can do. And she was very much that type of problem solver. And again, it wasn't that she came up with unbelievable new ideas, but the point was she didn't let it stop her. She didn't let it get her down. She just said, okay, we have this issue. Let's work on solving it. And she would be there and we would talk about it. And eventually we would come to certain conclusions. Once she got me involved, so we were both having this conversation, but I think she was really the leader in that. She was there for the kids. The kids could do no wrong, right? And not that she knew that the kids could do no. She knew when a kid misbehaved and stuff. And when a teacher sent something home, we took it seriously. But we always looked at the positive side of the kids. Okay, we always stress the kids that you got this problem with your teacher, and you weren't, you didn't show up for school, you played hooky, or you were chutzpahdik to the teacher. But let's try to work on the positive things, in yourself, in your life, and see that how important it is to be positive and not be negative with the teachers, negative with school and stuff like that. I think she was very good at that. She was very good at looking at the positive and always being there for them. They never felt alone. I was very busy. Sometimes the kids said to me, Daddy, I think, you're more concerned about your students than your children, right? And I felt this many times. I think today, now that they're grown up, they see life differently. They see my life and Esther's life differently. But Esther was very different than me in this. I was much more heavily involved with the schools, with the students, with the alumni. She was it was very clear. You're never alone. Okay. I'm going to be there right behind you. I'm there with you. I'm right behind you. Go for it. Right. And I think that was a very big contribution to her. And when teachers said things that she felt that were not right about the kids, she defended them 100%. She didn't let it go. She really defended them. And I think that's what really, one thing we were very makbid on, Donna. There's one thing, right? This is the only thing we're makbid on with the kids is, let me see how to say it. You have to be who you are and not somebody else. You have to achieve your potential, who you are, and not your friend and not your cousin and not anybody else. We always just say that's the only thing we'll makbid on. Be yourself. Okay? Don't be anybody else.
Wow.
And I feel that telling them that helped them become happy people because when you're somebody else, you're never happy because it's not you really. But when you really, develop into who you're supposed to be, and it doesn't mean, they were all rocket scientists, of course. Everyone developed into their own, their talents and their abilities, right? But it was theirs. It wasn't somebody else's.
Wow.
And they always heard that from us.
That's a very what's the right word? You have to have a lot of confidence in order to be able to encourage your kids to do that, especially in the society that we live in. It's really an amazing thing. It's so beautiful. I just have to pause and reflect as I'm listening to you, Rabbi, that I feel so personally, I feel very encouraged and in awe. It's very exciting listening to the things that you're saying. So thank you. I want to just end with one more very specific question about Purim as we come up to Purim next week. That we've mentioned the challenges already of Purim and in general, trying to be happy when you have a lot of things going on in your life that that you're, that you wish were different, let's just say. Sometimes it's a lonely day for people, even if it's a very full day. So I was thinking it would be nice if we could leave our listeners with like one primary theme, one focus that we could carry with us throughout the day to help access that feeling of Simcha. And of course, you've given us many, many good ideas already, but something maybe tied into Purim that we can access on Purim that's regardless of what our circumstances are on that particular day.
That's a great
have
question.
Something for us?
Question. Yeah, I have some stuff for you. Let me just think a second.
Okay.
When you say, I do find that some of our alumni and some of my friends, some of them get into Purim big time. They actually want it to be 2 weeks, not 2 days, right? And other people feel that that's not, they don't celebrate Simcha that way, like Yehudim Haisa Eruv Simcha, right? They don't celebrate Simcha, people getting drunk and stuff. They look at that as very negative. And I believe that you have to celebrate Purim in the way that makes you happy. Okay? And we know that there's room to not get drunk on Purim. There's plenty of poskim that hold you can take a drink and drink a little bit more than you used to, and you fulfill your obligation. That's not the point of Purim, even though some people think or make it the point of Purim getting drunk. They're like sort of excuse to get drunk. But there are other people who can't stand that. I think, first of all, if neighbors know that people don't enjoy Purim, the neighbors are responsible, and the friends of these people are responsible to help them enjoy Purim. Help them find their Purim, okay? And sometimes their Purim is different than other people's Purims, right? So I just want to say about Purim, we should never forget about the overriding theme of Purim. We're not celebrating just a historical event. Judaism was not only about historical events. We're happy because we have a special relationship with God. God was not seen in the whole Megillah, and he was everywhere. Okay, that is what Purim is about. Mordechai, doesn't know what's happening with Esther. He doesn't see what's going on. He saves the king from two people who are plotting against him. He doesn't know how it's all going to work out, but he knows in the background, right? And we say in Israel sometimes, Asimon Nafal, right? He all of a sudden gets that bulb lit up in his head. That Esther, now he waited for years to find out why Esther became the queen, this nice Beis Yaakov girl, right? And he sees this, right? At that moment, the Jews are in such great need, right? And again, God's name is not mentioned there in the Megillah, probably to tell us that even when we don't see him, he's there behind the scenes, and he's rooting for us, and he's fighting for us, God. And sometimes it's very hard to see that. And then other times we all of a sudden see it and we cannot see it, right? October 7th was a very hard time to see God. And October 8th, 9th, and 10th and onward throughout the war, so many people, got up and said, I saw 10 different things that God was involved in, perfect things that could have gone wrong with, these Israelis, fighting back and stuff like this. So we always have, I think Purim is about this theme that we have to be extremely happy that we're Jewish people, that we're special people, that God takes care of us at the end of the day. And he's always keeping an eye on us, just like the parent who may be looking out the window to make sure the kid is okay, right? But not necessarily standing next to them. And I think the theme of the day should be Ashreinu matov chelkeinu mana im gorelenu ma yafa Yerushaseinu. In other words, that's what the theme should be, that we are so special. We have, we're so, when we say Ashrei, right? Ashrei means it's praiseworthy. We're happy. We have such a happy lot. Matov chelkeinu, right? We have this lot that we were given by God. We're a special nation. And of course, we know with anti-Semitism today, right, that they try to show us we're not a special nation. We're a terrible nation, right? But if you really look more deeply, you'll see how special we really are. You'll see how special we are, how special the army is, right? How special the people of Israel and the Jewish people all over the world. I don't have to tell you that when that plane landed in Detroit.
I was just thinking that, Rabbi.
It landed in Detroit. Detroit has probably the greatest Arab population that exists in America. I am not certain that if an Arab airline had landed there because of the snow, I'm not certain the Arabs would have done what the Jews did. Okay, I'm not certain at all. Okay, I don't want to be judgmental, but I'm not certain at all. Okay, you'd see what they did, right? How special are we? Okay, a plane lands, you can invite them to your house for the evening or something, but this is something far beyond that. And Detroit is not a wealthy community. If it would have been in Kennedy and the 5 towns, right, they would have had a wedding there, right? But it's not a wealthy community. It's a very, like I say, content community with what they have. And yet they came out, and religious, secular Jews, and probably some non-Jews on the plane as well, right? That was just open for everybody. And that's the way we are. We have such a beautiful nation. We're the first people to answer any call of a tsunami or an earthquake or something, right? We have, and people just focus on just half the time. They're either half lies or whole lies, what they focus on. That's what we should say. Ashreinu matov chalkeinu mana im gorelenu. We have such a tremendous goral that we were given. Mayafa Yerusha saying that we have God gave us this Torah tzivalanu Moshe morashaki lat Yaakov. Yerusha saying that's what God gave us, and that's what really we should be focusing on. And with all this anti-Semitism, which we had in Shushan very clearly, right? We should be focusing on, you know what? We're really special. And when you look at the Jewish people, and you look at the Jewish people in Israel, we are so special in so many different ways. And that's what I think the focus should be.
Rabbi Shurin, I have to tell you that your happiness, your Simcha is contagious. I came into this conversation feeling okay, but now I'm leaving it very happy and I'm smiling really from ear to ear. It's been such a pleasure to talk with you about this really important topic. And maybe you want to just give our listeners a bracha for the week.
Okay, that's great. That's a great idea. In other words, Bezrat Hashem, everybody who's listening and even the people who are not listening, right, should have a wonderful, uplifting, spiritual, and of course, very happy Purim, and we should all drink to that.
What? L'chaim.
Right.
Okay, so I just want to say to our listeners that if you have any questions that you'd like to submit for a future episode, please email us at questions@darcheinoam.org, or most of you know how to reach me on WhatsApp or email personally. And if you found this conversation meaningful, please subscribe to the podcast and share it with others that you think might benefit from it. And of course, if you'd like to support our work at Shapell's and MRC, helping us to educate and inspire the next generation of Torah Jews, please visit us at darcheinoam.org/donate. And for now, I'll wish everyone a joyful and meaningful Purim.
Amen.